So for most of you watching, the fantasy football playoffs are here. And that means that we need to absolutely maximize every single point that we can get in fantasy football. And I know that some of you are in some leagues that don't have kickers. I understand that. But a lot of us, kickers can make or break the freaking week in fantasy football. And that's exactly why I do kicker rankings on a weekly basis during the fantasy football season on YouTube here. So today, we are getting into the top 12 kickers for fantasy football in week 15. And I am one of the only fantasy football YouTubers who goes over kicker rankings on a weekly basis. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and dive right into this right now. So Brandon Aubrey is back here at number 1. Nothing is changing. He's taking on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. So you can see on the screen exactly what Brandon Aubrey is doing. What Brandon Aubrey is able to do is honestly not only extremely impressive and rare, but this is something that I do view as sustainable. I do view it as sustainable because he operates in an offense that, yes, their touchdowns are exceeding the number of field goals he's able to kick. But when you look at the screen, it's not like he's kicking 20 field goals on the season. That's Jason Sanders' problem, by the way. In Miami, they only score touchdowns. They don't really get many field goal attempts. That's why you don't see Jason Sanders here much. With Brandon Aubrey, it's not the case. That's why he's still averaging over 11 fantasy points per game at the kicker position. To put that into context, those are running back 2 numbers. Those are wide receiver 2 numbers. Those are tight end 1 numbers. Finding the right kicker is massive, and Brandon Aubrey, week by week, just continues to get it done. Over 20 points last week. I think he can absolutely do it once again in this particular week. Justin Tucker at number 2 at the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. So Justin Tucker, I think when you look at his situation, it's sort of similar in a way to Dallas' situation where it's like 38 extra point attempts and 29 field goal attempts. The problem with Justin Tucker, as I've been saying for months now, he has not been himself this year. Yes, he's still good, and he's a Hall of Fame kicker if I have ever seen one. But you can see the numbers on the screen. The guy has missed 6 kicks this year, 5 field goals. His longest kick, 50 yards. Aubrey's, 60 yards. So that's why he's averaging 9.2 fantasy points per game, when in reality, he could be averaging probably 10.5. Justin Tucker is definitely dealing with some inaccuracy issues this year. The offense he's on is excellent. It's the perfect offense for a kicker, and the matchup here against Jacksonville is great. But I do have my issues here with Justin Tucker. Not this particular week, though. Lucas Havrisik of the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Washington Commanders at home. So I may have very well just butchered this guy's name. Like, it's absolutely possible that I just butchered his name. And when you can see the numbers on the screen, it's not like it's anything super impressive. In fact, a lot of guys that are going to follow him have better numbers than he does. So why is he here at number 3? Not only do I love the matchup versus Washington, what they did last week against the Baltimore Ravens, and what Lucas did specifically, he had over 12 fantasy points at the kicker position. That's a big, big week against a way tougher opponent. Washington, there may be a free-for-all for points here. I think that Lucas definitely has some early issues that could be noted here. I mean, 4 missed kicks already with 13 extra point attempts and 13 field goal attempts. Not good. The ratio is good, though. That's a good ratio to have. So if he could just make his kicks, we should be in good shape here in week 3. Dustin Hopkins at number 4 versus the Chicago Bears. So I've already seen questions and concerns related to the weather. And I want to discuss this with kickers specifically. When it comes to the weather of games, I do think it's worth noting here. Like, Dustin Hopkins had the weather be sunny and 70 degrees in Cleveland in December, which is not happening. Like, if that was the case, I would say, yeah, he'd be over Lucas. He would have been number 3 this week, maybe even number 2. You know, it definitely affects them, but it doesn't go to the point where I think that we need to bench a guy like Dustin Hopkins. That's just not where I think we're at. Dustin Hopkins has been elite. You can see the numbers on the screen. They just keep getting They're kind of stabilizing at this point. They were going down, but he actually had a pretty good week last week, 9 fantasy points. So I don't really worry about the offense because Joe Flacco leading this offense only means that they're going to lead the ball more down the field, but he just may not, like the Browns have been doing all year, not capitalize at the red zone. So that leaves a lot of that leaves a lot of field goal opportunities for Dustin Hopkins. This week against the Bears, I like the matchup here in this particular week. Jake Elliott at number 5, taking on the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. You can see Jake Elliott on the screen, and this is why I discuss fantasy football being important when you look at it from a 4 quarters perspective. The first quarter of the season, Jake Elliott was elite and the number 1 kicker without question. There was no questioning that. He was easily the number 1 kicker. Then by quarter 2, started to kind of go downhill a little bit. Quarter 3, not good. He dropped quite a bit. And now he's starting to kind of recover himself because simultaneously, Philly's kind of reverting back to what they were offensively early in the year in quarter 4. That's the problem that Philly's experiencing offensively. Not capitalizing as much in the red zone. Not scoring as many touchdowns consistently. Jake Elliott's been able to get more field goal opportunities. And that's helping him average about 9.5 fantasy points. So the offensive kind of drawbacks that Philly's been experiencing have actually been good for Jake Elliott. And that's why this week against the Seahawks, who are also moving in the wrong direction, they find that he finds himself at number 5. Evan McPherson versus Minnesota. And Evan McPherson is honestly, he's in a really good position. McPherson averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game. And you can see that field goal number is a little bit behind the extra point number. The good thing is it's actually closing in. Now the problem is 5 missed field goal attempts, not a good thing. But as long as this offense continues to function the way they have, I think that against Minnesota, McPherson could continue to have, 3 opportunities for field goals per game and maybe 3 extra point attempts per game. I like having McPherson again this week. Blake Group at number 7 versus the New York Giants. Blake Group he usually kind of hangs around this area. Blake Group is the type of guy that is going to hang around this area for a while. I mean, when you can see the numbers on the screen, it's like the attempts of field goals are great. Like they're exceeding the number of extra point attempts. That's led him to having 9 fantasy points per game. The problem he's experienced all year, 7 missed field goals. That's not good. That costs you points. So he's got issues here. I do have issues with Blake Group. I wish he was more accurate. But in the offense he operates in, he continues to get opportunities, and opportunities is what we're looking for here. Now, if you had, Dustin Hopkins or McPherson or, somebody like maybe someone like Harrison Butker in that type of offense, they'd be higher on this list because they're better kickers. But Blake Group, with the opportunities he gets at number 7, very comfortable here. Nick Folk, the grandfather of the NFL, taking on the Houston Texans this week at number 8. Nick Folk is honestly just like, it's been a while since we've seen like a big game from Nick Folk. Honestly, what he is just consistent. In fantasy football, very consistent kicker. Offense is not great, but it's actually relatively okay for him. I mean, he's averaging more field goal attempts than extra points, and he's averaging almost 9 fantasy points per game because he just doesn't really miss much. 2 missed kicks this year, dude's over 40. I mean, that's what Nick Folk can do for you. He's consistent and you can count on him. This week against Houston, I do think that there's more opportunities for Tennessee to score. I discussed it on my running back rankings video. Derrick Henry has absolutely planted the Houston Texans over the years. Houston Texans probably without CJ Stroud this week. So I think that really, in reality, Nick Folk could have an opportunity to get 4 field goal attempts this week, and that's exactly what I want from my fantasy football kicker. Brandon McManus. Yeah, he lands at number 9 versus the Baltimore Ravens here this week. Now, Brandon McManus, if you looked at my fantasy football kicker rankings video for the playoffs, you would have saw Brandon McManus really, really high and to be like, why is he back here at number 9? You know, if Trevor Lawrence didn't have the high ankle sprain, he would be there. I do have issues, though. I mean, I understand that Brandon McManus, may not be in as bad of a situation as I once thought, because Trevor Lawrence played last week. He didn't miss time. But if you're going to tell me that he was 100%, that's not true. And if you're telling me that he's 100% again this week, I'd say very, very unlikely. And I wouldn't believe it. With the matchup here against the Ravens, it's not ideal. But Brandon McManus is still in an offense that can get down there. They can still get him in opportunities. That's why I like Brandon McManus at number 9, because he's been mostly good for the majority of the season. Will Lutz at number 10, at the Detroit Lions here. Will Lutz had a down week last week. No way around it. His averages dropped in every category. I mean, the dude is averaging 8.5 fantasy points now, and he was on a really big streak past several weeks. What you like to see, it's similar to Tennessee. It's actually better, though. Kind of in the New Orleans category, where it's 28 field goal attempts, 25 extra point attempts. Will Lutz has been inconsistent, but I do think that against Detroit's lousy defense this week, there's going to be opportunities. And again, you give me a better kicker like Harrison Butker or Jake Elliott, they're higher on this list in this type of offense. But Will Lutz gets opportunities, and he's been mostly good, which is why he finds himself at number 10 this week. Anders Carlson of the Green Bay Packers making his triumphant return after a long absence at number 11 versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Anders Carlson, honestly, I've been kind of watching him for a couple weeks now, and for the majority of the time, he doesn't prove me to be worthy of the top 12. It's a very exclusive list here. So, you can see on the screen, he's not even averaging 7 fantasy points per game. That's not good. And I can't trust him ordinarily in that type of situation, especially when he's missed 6 kicks this year. But what I was expecting from Green Bay's offense last week against the Giants did not come to fruition whatsoever. So if they continue to flounder against the Buccaneers, who are just as bad of a defense, if not worse than the Giants, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Anders Carlson to get down there, for Green Bay's offense to not capitalize, and for him to kick a field goal. That's why he's here at number 11. And at number 12, rounding it out, Cairo Santos would be higher. The Chicago Bears kicker taking on the Cleveland Browns this week. He would be higher on this list if they weren't playing the Browns. I do think that there's a decent chance that this Bears offense could kind of not revert back necessarily, but definitely struggle against the Browns. On the road, in bad weather. I know that they're a bad weather team anyways, but Cairo Santos, again, the weather does matter to a point. If it weren't for the weather, he'd be up a spot probably, but if it weren't for the fact that I just think this game script might go bad, he'd actually be up a much higher, probably in the top 10. So Cairo Santos, I definitely like him. I like the trajectory he's on. I like the offense he plays on. I like the situation because they're scoring more points in Chicago, but I do think that there could be a chance where Chicago just doesn't score as many points and have as many opportunities, which is why he's here at number 12 when ordinarily he would be higher on this list this week. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for Week 15 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for Week 15 fantasy football, click on this video right here.